Yep.
Right, so we are out of court and it's the end of day 1 of a 3-day trial. And at the end of day 1, it turns out, no case to answer.
No case to answer because the judge made it clear to the prosecution that the testament from the superintendent and other officers was not, in fact, real.
Yeah. So, and we've got Steve here with us because Steve's our law expert. But from what I can say, something that is very important in law is that the wording is correct, and we've learned that from Steve. What the chief inspector said, what Dolby said, what the other Macroness was it, the sergeant, and what everybody else said is that we were asked to leave the land. What was proven in court is that we were never asked to leave the land. We were invited to stay on the land.
Yeah.
And it was.
In fact, it was in three.
I got my natty on it.
Oh, don't worry. Just keep it going. Keep it going. Yeah.
In fact, Dan, it was.
Wait, start up again.
In fact, Dan, it was in stages. First of all, don't come further than the reception desk. They didn't do. Secondly, can you stand in the foyer? They moved to the foyer. Can you stand outside? They moved outside. In the meantime, there was no disruption to the vaccine centre because they'd already got a plan in place to use another door.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was no infraction or incursion into any part of that vaccine centre within the first 5 minutes. The prosecution argued that they were, and I'll use his words, vexatious, highly motivated, confrontational, putting microphones and cameras in your face and getting their viewpoints across strident.
Yeah.
None of that applied to either you or I, and in fact only one person that applied to, and that was Watkins, the one that was getting on the nerves of the judge.
Yeah, and we've already established what the first people did. You had the healthcare worker come on, she cried her way into the judge's heart. Obviously we saw completely through that, having watched Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. We know what play acting is. Second guy came in, he sees it, saw it as a bit of a laugh and a joke. He said that he didn't find it amusing, he was quite intimidated. When the CCTV again shows that he was laughing all the way through. But then you had
his mask.
Yeah, exactly. And then it led on to the police, and this is where I want to speak to Steve, because you've spent a lot of time in court.
Yes.
You've been in the dock. What was your summary of how the police presented today?
Well, start at the beginning, the way the police presented when they arrested you. Why? I'll tell you now, I've been saying this, holding back because it's ongoing investigation and court proceedings. This could have been avoided, thousands of pounds could have been saved. This is all political, right? I've been an inspector for 30 years, I retired in 2011, right? It was my job to go to those scenarios. Any major incidents, political events, I would go there. This is how I would have dealt with it, okay? Not how the modern day woke police have dealt with it. I returned up there, gone and spoke to two sides involved in this. So I spoke to the staff to see what they had to say.
Yeah.
I would have gone outside, spoken to the people protesting. At that stage, I would have established who the protesters were. There were 3 people protesting on that day. These 2 persons were filming and reporting. I've established that because, being an ex-detective, they were wearing little crest lanyards. They were wearing jackets and t-shirts saying they were media. So that would have given me a little bit of suspicion that they were media. Perhaps, a bit of investigative skills have gone out the window.
Yeah, it seems like.
Anyway, so once I made that decision, if it was the BBC and they were wearing BBC coats with big BBC cameras, I'm sure the chief inspector would have acted differently.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a different thing. So establish here, and I get there now, that you got 3 protesters and a media crew outside. What's their attitude like? All right, you've got one of them, Mr. Watkins, he's expressing his views and criminal rights. But why are they doing it? They feel strongly, rightly or wrongly, that people are being injured and hurt and they want to protect people. They're not trying to earn money, they're not being thugs, they feel they want to help people. Okay, so they got a right under the Human Rights Act to protest peacefully, okay? So you ask them to stand in the area, which has been allocated, we're told.
Well, 6 different places, but yeah.
But so certainly near the entrance, and the chief inspector said today, he had no problem with them moving to this allocated protest area, right? So I would have said, can you please go over there? You can still carry on what you want to do. And I've gone to the member of the staff, the manager, and said, listen, all they want to do is present you their point of view. Does one of you want to come across perhaps and speak to them? If not, you don't have to. They then will be happy. You've got the entrance rate clear. Compromise. Everyone's happy. Business goes on. Instead, the chief inspector comes down. He gives, or he tries to give this direction, which he messes up badly. Because all he does, he says, would you please move over there if you want to carry on protesting? Okay? So that's fair enough. So he's offered an invitation to carry on. Yeah. But then he changes his mind because one person wants to carry on talking and putting his point of view across. Well, if that was me, well, you can talk to that person, have a conversation. It's not going to take me a lot of time and tie up officers with the arrest. It's not going to take thousands of pounds of police time and court time.
Yeah.
So even if I spend half an hour talking to this gentleman about his point of views, I might not agree with his point of views, but we are entitled to different points of views, okay? Have a chat with him for half an hour over there, out of the way of who's coming and going, and have a chat with the staff and say, thank you very much, problem solved. Now, call me old-fashioned, but that's more logical, more common sense than what's happened today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the point. That's the point. Harry Miller said it. You've said it.
Yeah.
Common sense with the police force is out of the window.
You're not allowed it.
Because you're not allowed it.
Yeah.
And then you had the 5-star treatment. Because what they called in then is the CID and a load of staff. So those officers, I can tell you now, their workload is massive, right? Dealing with crimes.
Real crimes.
Real crimes, yeah. We're not talking about the non-crime hate incidents.
Yeah.
They are, right? They're not coping, right? You look at the detection rates for all the police forces, they're not coping, they're not doing very well. 20,000 coppers have been, experienced coppers have been sacked. They filled them back now with young, inexperienced cops, as we saw today in court. Honestly, what I saw in court, we'll talk about that in a minute. They're very inexperienced, very young, and they've got to learn it. It's like training a doctor, right? You do the basics, but then you've got to go on the street and you've got to learn. It takes years and years and years to learn how to deal with crime. That isn't happening, and we are now seeing the result of it, okay? So, when they've got you in custody for 36 hours, they want to go and search your houses. So they then start looking for excuses to do that, and they come out, you had a fraudulent instrument, I believe it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that makes it then a major crime where they can undo the warrants and search. When it comes back to when he's at the scene, which is important, as he brought out today, why won't he recognise Voice of Wales as media? He knew who Voice of Wales are. It was obvious he'd heard the Voice of Wales, besides it being all over your shirts and jackets.
Yeah.
But when the officer went up to him and said, oh, but these people here are media, he said, Voice of Wales? No, put them in, get rid of them.
And you get.
So he obviously had information as to what he thinks we are. Now, it's not for them. They might not agree with what Voice of Wales does, but if police were truly non-political, like we used to be,
Yeah.
it shouldn't make a
It wouldn't
difference.
matter.
Doesn't matter. He wouldn't have done that to the BBC, the ITN or Sky. He wouldn't have done it to Wales Online.
No.
He wouldn't have done it to the Argus, right? But because Voice of Wales, get in that car, you go in, you're going to have free food and breakfast for 36 hours.
Yeah.
And that's what's
Without
happening.
the food and breakfast.
This is political, I can say from experience, and I suspect phone calls being made after Stan's little chat with Mark Trayford. I think the chats have been had with the police crime commissioner and the senior police officers.
Yeah.
And the first opportunity they had, they jumped on it. Now, the normal procedure for that sort of incident, 3 protesters and a camera crew, is for the inspector to go down and take charge of it. Even a sergeant, an experienced sergeant, could deal with it.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. Chief Inspector was in his office. Here's what's going on. So we've had, obviously, the body cam of the conversations with the control room officers speaking to the control room. And you think, Voice of Wales are down there.
I'll get a
Brownie
promotion.
points.
I'll get a promotion.
Brownie points.
Yeah.
Brownie points. So he dashes out of his office, right? And dives into it. And then he buggers it up. He totally buggers it up. There's no other way around it, right?
Yeah.
And then instead of giving the direction to leave the land, it's quite easy, really, reading the legislation. That's what I've said to you over and over and over
Yeah,
throughout this for 8 months. They didn't give you direction to leave the land. They invited you to carry on protesting. Just go stand by there, boys. Carry on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where it's all gone wrong.
Yeah, and I think two things that were clear to me is the first Dolby's footage that we are going to be bringing to you very soon shows when he says, you know, what media are you from? Voice was, yeah, in you get, slammed the door behind me, and then he says to her, Dolby, they're nothing, it doesn't exist, load of nonsense. But then when he was cross-examined and he was asked about Voice of Wales, he said, well, I don't recognise Voice of Wales as media. Well, unlucky, because that's not your call.
Well, what information has he got to recognise or not recognise Voice of Wales? He must have information to make that decision.
You're right, Steve. And he actually he changed the wording slightly. He doesn't recognise us. He didn't say, I don't know of them.
Yeah, I don't recognise Voice of Wales as media.
Correct.
You know, and that's very different. So what does he recognise us as then? You know?
But then that was interesting at that point. The judge came to his defence
Yes.
and says,
Yeah.
well, you know,
Where are you going with this?
where are you going with this? And he says, well, it's not down to me as a police officer to make inquiries to see if they're press. Well, it is.
Yeah.
In these circumstances, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it certainly is, because of course on the back of these it says that the policing college will only recognise
says it's
accredited media.
Police Chiefs Council recognise the holder of this card.
So
bona
therefore,
fide.
he has to make inquiries, surely.
That's what I would have thought. But good result.
Fantastic results. Very disappointed with the summing up of the judge at the end.
Yeah.
Basically turning around and saying, the wrong charge was put on you. You're innocent of that because the chief inspector stroke superintendent didn't give you a direction to leave. If you've been charged with the section 68, the actual aggravated trespass, you could have been in trouble, right? Now, as far as I'm concerned, they've had a long time to look into this. The Crown Prosecution Service would make that decision for which charge to put on. They decided there wasn't enough there for aggravated trespass. They decided to go for fail to leave the land.
Yeah.
So there we are. You can't be both ways.
No. Yeah.
They've had time.
Yeah.
They've got the resources, very supposedly experienced solicitors working in the CPS, and they chose the wrong charge.
Yeah. They were just desperate to get us in and look for something. You know, it definitely came across like that. The judge, you know, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you not guilty. Unfortunately, what do you mean unfortunately? Fortunately, you should be giving me not guilty because if I am not guilty. Simple as that. But I do think this is going to be something that is going to be ongoing. We have got a case now for wrongful arrest, and it's definitely something we're going to be pursuing. But other than that, not guilty. Win for independent media, I would say.
Yeah.
Can I just say as well, for message for the police, God bless them, once they finish crying, stop coming from the media. We're not going to roll over. It isn't just these two guys. I tell you now, it's a big team. It's a big team backed up by senior police officers. I'm in the lower rank of those retired police officers, for you to know. We will give them our backing to keep them within the law so that we get free speech out to the public. That is what we are there for. They've also got solicitors now, and we've got barristers willing to come and defend them at every incident. So please just get on with your jobs.
Yeah.
Please keep instructing your staff how to wiggle their bottoms and to take part in the gay pride. But leave Voice of Wales, get on with their job, and you get on with your job. Keep out of politics and try to work on your detections, improve your detections, put your resources into tackling real crime.
Like rape,
Yes.
Yeah.
female genital mutilation.
Child grooming.
Yeah.
Child
There's loads. This shows to me the lack of prioritisation by the senior officers. Right?
Absolutely.
They've jumped on this, which is a summary-only trial at the end of the day, right?
Yep.
And they've chucked the CID team into it, costing wasted thousands of pounds worth of police money to try to get Voice of Wales.
Yeah. And then the police are going to complain that they're underfunded.
Yes,
Which
and then
is-
they're
which is-
staffed.
Mental. But there we go. We are going to put all the footage together. So we've been holding off on the actual footage from the day, but we've got more to add to it now as well, because we want to make sure we give you the full fat version.
And we'll highlight, of course, where the officers have lied on statements and in court.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. absolutely.
The judge said that she doesn't really want to see you guys around outside vaccine centres or whatever. You guys going to live up to basically telling them where you can't report on. You can't report on. Basically, she was saying is we don't want freedom of the press. She was basically saying.
Yeah, we're going to carry on doing what we're doing within the law.
Good.
As we always have done.
Solicitor.
There's the CPS.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks very much, guys.
The decision now is to decide whether we're going to leave or move to the pub for a celebratory pint.
Yeah, well, I think we'll
Are we
stick
gonna
with
move or
move.
leave?
Let's move. Yeah. So that's it for us. We just want to say a massive thank you first of all for the entire Voice of Wales team. Like Steve said, we're the Muppets on the microphone and the camera. You know.
Yeah.
We got James, who's another Muppet, and Steve does a bit of Muppet work on the camera as well.
Yeah.
But we've got a big team. You know, we've got a lot of people who do the research, a lot of people who guide us legally. So a massive thank you to all of them.
And
who work
thank
with
you
us.
for all the people that have wished us luck today. It's been non-stop.
Yeah, absolutely, and all of the people who have supported us throughout.
Oh, look, a police vehicle for Superintendent Smith and
Yeah.
others.
That was for us, but they're going to change it now, won't it?